Welcome to What Grows. It's a podcast where we play with the connection between who we are and how we grow. I'm your host, Noella Moshi. So, Galen, your work with Jibu challenges conventional development models by prioritizing self-sustaining systems over dependency. You've also shared fun insights on Twitter, including this quote: "Nothing worthwhile ever gets accomplished unless the degree of enthusiasm far exceeds that which is justified by a close examination of the facts." I'm so happy to have you here today because you're a big picture thinker who doesn't shy away from introspection, and you embrace adventure, you appreciate diverse cultures, and you bring a healthy dose of humor to it all. You're also good with pushing past perceived limitations. Another quote of a quote from your Twitter: "Genius is not a person, it's a process in which someone is able to uncover their gift and for a period step inside it. Genius is no reason for arrogance." So I can't wait to dive into this conversation with you. Welcome.
So thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
If you could give your life a title, like a book, what would that title be?
I can't think of a way to make it a sexy title, but essentially, I think my career and work has been about being a bridge, a communicator between emerging market communities and entrepreneurs and old market investors and capital and all of that. And so I think the translation I do in the stories I see of things on the ground, um, and and the translation I have to do from what I hear from investors and all of that, that's ended up being, I feel like, a niche where I can add the most value in my career and work. So I don't know if there's like a good title for it, but maybe the liaison.
Oh, the liaison.
Yeah.
Yes. Those are two very different worlds. What does it take to be a good translator?
Listening would be the number one characteristic I think that's required, and I I think it's about having the balance where you have enough humility to listen well, but at the same time, confidence that your own intuition and experiences also matter, and an ability to recognize your own lens, as well as um, be able to put yourself in the shoes or have the empathy to understand others in a deeper way. And I think throughout, I've always like vacillated between thinking, oh, I can add no value whatsoever because I'm just this big, white guy, like tromping around environments where I'm not actually native. I don't understand the context nearly as well. And then thinking, wait a minute, I think I do have, if I listen and have this empathy here, I do have important value I can add by sharing my understanding of things with with our investors, with our partners, all of that in ways that enable them to understand it better. So but I would say listening by far is like the number one most important thing.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I've definitely felt like I play the translator role. It is interesting because I mean we look different. You're a white man, I'm a black woman. And so we kind of, I don't know, depending on who we're facing, maybe represent different things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So when I
Yep.
was working for a family foundation, I did feel like I had to represent the entrepreneurs that we were supporting, but I also had to get out of the way of their story, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And
Exactly.
and I think the skills that I needed to bring to that translation were skills that I first needed to apply to myself. Like I don't think you can be a good listener or you can be empathetic in one area very well without kind of training it in all the other areas and training it for yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, my dad was a pastor until I was like 10 or 11 years old. And so I grew up like very steeped in like Bible teachings and all this. And still, there's still like some values, in the Bible that I find very important. And one of them is kind of this idea of what you do in the small things every day determines what you can do on a bigger level as well. I think that that concept of yeah, being able to cultivate your land and the immediate environment you have around you to the best of your ability enables different insights that you wouldn't otherwise be able to have.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes when I think about really interesting work that I've, been privileged to be able to do, my most treasured memories or some of my most treasured memories are the really simple day-to-day things like I taught someone how to do something on Excel. And I know that they're going to do that for the next like 20 years of their career well. And I'm wondering about you've been at this for a while with Jibble. What does effective leadership, what does being a good CEO mean for you?
Wow, yeah, it's a big question. I think the CEO is almost like a switchboard of information more so than, well, that's how I see the role at least, more so than sort of a tyrant that's just has their own vision and determining everything that needs to go. I see it more like, there's all these currents and energy and momentum happening in different directions when you have an empowered team of owners. And the CEO's job is how do you channel those currents in the right way to enable the whole company to thrive.
Yeah, and sometimes there's just everyone is in sync, and then sometimes they're not. And I'm thinking about yeah, your what you tweeted about optimism specifically here, because there are moments where reality doesn't match what we want it to be, and I've been struggling with this as well as I'm kind of setting up a business for myself and trying to be more formal about it. What marketing and sales really means to me, there's value that I believe I can add, and I'm putting that out there. But there's this tension with I don't really want to manipulate or even nudge people into thinking they need my product if they really don't. And similarly with teams and with, I don't know, with customers, it's if they are not seeing the value of what I'm providing, if my reality or what I think is reality doesn't match what they say, and I think the translator role feeds into this. How do I navigate that tension?
I guess the things that pop to mind for me on that front would be, one is like, what's the litmus test of like how much you're actually investing in the marketing and sales? And I think if you have it extreme, if a company ends up having extremely bloated budget on that front, it may be evidence of exactly what you're saying, where you're trying to force a product on customers that they don't actually need. Um, Whereas if you have some more of like organic type of growth and a smaller marketing budget, it might be indicative of the fact that you're providing a real service. On the flip side, I do trust customers to be able to decide what they want and need, and that's, I mean, we can take like a paternalistic approach and say, well, people shouldn't be eating sugar, or shouldn't be smoking tobacco and all this type of thing. um, but I feel like my ethical decision as a company is that I don't want to provide things that violate my own ethical standards, and then the things that we provide, I rely on our customers ethical barometer, if it's something that they want. But yeah, it's a difficult line to draw. Where do we trust customers to live by their own value sets versus which ones do we want to, project onto them? So how we try to approach it is, what do we believe in? What are our standards? And are we selling products that we believe are, living up to that? And then we do have like a level of trust that customers will make their own decision as far as if it's right for them also.
Yeah. I want to change topics a little bit because I'm curious about how you developed those ethical standards. You mentioned that your father was a pastor for quite some time. And I think what you've been, an adult living independently also for quite some time. So there's a code of conduct that is kind of given to us by our parents and that we maintain. And then there's a stage where we interrogate that and then we keep what's valuable to us through our experience. Can you tell me about a time when you had to interrogate your kind of pre-existing code of conduct and change it to suit you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I definitely had yeah, several like key moments in life where I had to interrogate that. Um, and I remember really as especially as an adolescent, like first starting to like question things like in the end of high school and when I first started college, um, and it being a really scary thing because it's like I don't want to be so arrogant that I throw away all this rich cultural tradition and history and all these smart people before us and have my just decide my own thing. But at the same time, I was noticing incongruence where some of the things I was handed down felt very wrong, and I had to kind of come to grips with that. But I think I've had to rely on intuition, but also rely on mentors and other people that I look up to who can see, look, this is someone who is living in a way that I really admire, and this makes a lot of sense to me. And a lot of times, those are folks who have also, inherited their own traditions or values, and so I think it's become a blend of those folks I've learned from, my intuition, and then the ones I was kind of born into as far as the an early years environment.
Yeah. What's something that you believe now that you didn't believe when you were younger?
Um, I mean, a key point is like this concept of afterlife. So, as a child, I remember being terrified of the concept of going to heaven. And I wasn't, you're supposed to be afraid of like going to hell or whatever, but I was like really afraid of the concept of going to heaven because I couldn't imagine anything like a place that I would stay forever that I would really love like that much because I just felt kind of scary. And all the descriptions are always like in the clouds and golden streets or whatever. Um, and then, but the thing that really bothered me was this concept of the exclusivity of that afterlife. And some people, if they didn't believe a certain thing, were excluded from that, and other people would, get punished forever. And so that exclusivity aspect is something that I, a value set that I changed, and I feel like it's actually a very dangerous ideology in some ways to think that you love everyone, but at the same time some of them are doomed and others are going to a better place. If you have that underlying belief, it actually affects your how your love of people in some way. So that was it's something that's changed quite a bit over time.
Yeah. Wow, that is that's a really funny story. I I like that, being scared of heaven. I was raised Catholic, and I would say I'm Christian, but just in a, I think, a more broad sense than that right now. And something that's changed for me, and not really in a good way, is when I was a child, I was really excited about death. Like, not that, I thought about it all the time, but I just thought, well, I could screw up as much as I like, on Earth, because eventually it will end and I get to, like, hang out with people who love me later. So I might as well have a good time now. And it was just so fun and so freeing, and it meant I could be whoever I wanted to be and try whatever I wanted to try because there were no kind of forever mistakes. And
Hmm.
then as I got older, I started to really get attached to the stuff that I had kind of accumulated, relationships, not so much material possessions, but just identity, I would say, all of the things that I'd learned and the way that I saw myself. And the thought of losing all of that through death, which, obviously we don't have any evidence that it will all go away, but it might, became started to become really scary for me. But I think if I were to imagine a heaven that I would look forward to, it's one that I still have my identity, but it doesn't even matter because everyone else also does, and we're all kind of together, and there's like something much bigger than the individual. And that's something I could look forward to.
Well, I
Um,
love that. 'Cause I feel like I can feel that about you just in our conversations we've had. That you have that joy about you and that free spirit, and I think it still comes through. So even if you feel like you have that fear, I feel like I can sense that you have that free spirit underneath, like bursting out. So, so
yeah. Well, thank you. So what does a non-scary version of heaven look like to you?
to me, it's like it's it's dying. It's like actually being, you know, I don't know, ashes under a tree somewhere, or part of reincorporated into becoming dust, becoming part of the ground again. At some point, there's something beautiful to me about the finality of it, and actually things being done at some point. So I don't. It can be interpreted as like that's a depressing way to think about it, but I see it as well. I'll live. We have a limited time, and I want to maximize it and make the most of it now. And at some point, rest. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it.
A well-earned rest. And yeah, how does that, or does it shape your day to day? Does it shape your year to year to have that to, rest to look forward to?
Yeah, I well, so I grew up with three sisters and a brother, and then one sister just older than me. Um, she she would have like dreams about me like dying sometimes as kids, and I don't know where those dreams like came from. Um, but it shaped it made me think like growing up that I was always just going to die early, and I didn't feel scared of it or something. I just felt like matter of fact about it, and I think it motivated me to really live fully. And it's not like there's so many different ways you can interpret it. It could mean like, oh, you become a workaholic and work too hard because you want to accomplish things, or you just party all the time and all this. But I think if you really think that you're going to die tomorrow, then you it just changes your perspective about like, am I living every day exactly in a way that I would be proud of? Now I'm like way beyond the age at which I would ever thought I would live. But it's what do you call it? That urgency of every day is something that's still kind of there in how I operate.
You're not the first founder I've heard talk about that urgency. And I wonder if that's something that is common or even necessary to do something that many people think might not, is not possible sometimes, or think might be really hard. Um, I wonder if it's also when you think about businesses that are trying to leave the world better than they found it, like social enterprises. I wonder if leaders of social enterprises need that sense of urgency, because some of the problems are way, way bigger than someone with just like a general plodding along vibe would be able to handle.
Yeah, I think that time dimension is definitely a characteristic of entrepreneurs, or maybe I should rather say like it's a characteristic that has to be taken into account for a business to survive, because somehow momentum is everything. I mean, I know, like, remember Benjamin Franklin described a business or the economy like a bicycle. Like the moment it stops moving, it falls over. So I think there is that. I think there is that aspect that's a reality of business. So on my side, I don't know if it's like something I don't know if it's something I came in just knowing, or if it's something that coming, as an entrepreneur, you're just face to face with every day because you have the responsibility of making sure you keep the lights on, that people get their salaries, that customers get delivered on time, all that type of stuff. So it's definitely something that's amplified throughout the last 12 years of running the company. This sense of this sense of urgency.
Wow, I would have thought it would be the opposite. Like as you move forward, it's like, oh, it's more and more chill, and it's fine. But you're saying the urgency just keeps growing.
Well, okay. I mean, I can manage the stress like better, much better than before. But yeah, intuitively being aware of the urgency that's there in different situations is yeah, it's something that's definitely increased over time. Because there's so many things that you can do perfectly well, but if not on time, then it amounts to nothing. There's even the phrase like "time kills all deals." I think that's absolutely true. There's limited time that we have as far as like market conditions and all of this stuff needing to come together. So you build a product. If you spend too long building it, by the time it hits customers in the market, the market could have completely changed. There's an expiry date for any business innovation or product that comes quickly, and I think the speed of human innovation and evolution is always increasing, accelerating. So that urgency is proportionally always increasing.
Right. Yeah. No, actually, now that you've explained that to me, I can see that. And urgency doesn't necessarily mean panic. I mean, what you mentioned about your capacity to kind of has grown as your business has also grown. I think is really important. What does that what does that look like? Like growing your capacity to deal with urgent, yeah, things with an expiry date. What did it look like when you started?
I think when I started, it looked like, you know, a chicken running around with his head cut off, just not knowing what I was doing and frantically flapping around. Um, and now, I mean, it's not what it looks like, but what it should look like is more like kung fu, where you kind of, or jujitsu or something, where you have urgency, you're more precise, you have to have the rapid motion and response time, but it's much more measured and it's much more disciplined than just kind of flailing around. So that's how I would try to describe it. I mean, I think an example is, in the past, I think we would have a major challenge or something, and it would just be the immediate response would be just work all day and all night and run yourself into the ground, trying to solve that issue. And what would happen is like you make some progress for the first like day of that, and then the second day, third day, you're just like so tired that you're actually no longer making good decisions. It's like driving too long. You also create, it becomes less and less safe the longer you like are sleep deprived or whatever. And so now it can be much more measured where it's like, okay, how do we think about this problem? How do we put it in full context? How do we isolate it as a project and manage it, in that kind of compartmentalization, and then still have the uh, personal time barriers and management around how much you're devoting to solving it, so that you don't, you know, sacrifice your judgment on the basis of burning out.
Yes. Rest as responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I used to struggle with that a bit more because I had clients that I was, they're paying me hourly. Like I need to just every single hour, I need to be on it. And then to your point, there's diminishing returns. But if I take one of those hours off and go for a run and kind of not intentionally think about the problem or the strategy that I'm trying to build, just seeing, I don't know, the trees and just feeling kind of blood pump through my body, that means when I get back to my desk, like in 10 minutes, I do what I couldn't do in like 2 hours because my brain is just it's different from all of that. But it's so hard to say out loud. Like you need to pause for your own good, which I think is primary, but also for the good of the problem that you're trying to solve.
exactly. And also, I mean, it gives your experience a chance to like manifest itself, in the decisions being made. You don't even have ability to rationally think through all of that stuff, but if you just give yourself the space and time, that processing is happening in the background, even while you're exercising, like you said, and you'll find that this answer will come to you because actually you were working on that problem for 10 years, but you weren't able to synthesize all of that learning rationally. But but you could sort of with that subconscious processing that's happening. So yeah.
So how do you rest?
Me, the most sort of rejuvenating thing possible is just to spend time in nature, like to get far out from civilization and just be in green places. That to me is the most restorative thing possible. If it's like hiking and in nature, then it's even better because you're this the strain of putting yourself to work and not thinking about anything except for like the next step really is therapeutic too. There's actually so much like incredible nature in East Africa that's been protected, and it's very easy to get to. So I feel really fortunate to have that outlet there.
I'm going to change tack again because I want to know about a moment when your path could have gone another way.
Mm.
It,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So tell me
Yeah.
about not necessarily, it doesn't even have to be when you started Jibu. It could have been way before that. But is there a moment when you could have done something completely different? And what did that look like?
Yeah. When you ask that question, there's like two key moments that come to mind. And the first is, so I actually joined the army. So I joined, I was in the ROTC program in college, and they had like a full scholarship to college through the army. And so when I finished the 4 years, I was going to be actively deployed and like a 5 year commitment after that. So I did it for about a year, and then we had this survival training course, and one of the aspects at the end of the course was it's a shooting range. So you have an M5, and then you're just shooting targets that come up, and the targets are like shaped like people like out in the field, and like uniformed military people or whatever, and you have to kind of be in a meditative state to aim well when you're shooting. So you have to take deep breaths and all this, and so the combination of getting into that space where you're very calm and can shoot, and at the same time thinking about what am I actually doing? I'm actually practicing for shooting people, and and it just struck me like I'm like I could do anything with my life. Why would I choose to be part of an institution or machine that's actually designed for mass murder in some way? I mean, I'm not actually a pacifist. I'm not anti-military or something. That wasn't the takeaway for me, but the takeaway was I could do anything. Why would I choose this path for myself? And so, fortunately, there was a grace period of 1 year with the program where you could get out before the expiry of the first year and not have the normal obligations. So that happened when I was 18, and then interestingly, I ended up going to the Peace Corps after instead of doing instead of going the military route. So that was a big decision point for me. Another one that comes to mind is after starting Jibu. So I finished the Peace Corps, started Jibu, and I was actually I actually moved back from Morocco to the U.S. After living in Morocco for a couple years, and I was excited to be living back in the U.S. I just felt like, okay, I'd done my time in the village. Now I can have all the nice things, internet and hot showers and all that, and it just felt really nice. Um, but the idea of Jibu was there, and I had already co-founded it with my father and all this, and it was picking up steam. But it became clear that there's no way I could be flying over back and forth to really get this thing going, and I just had this knowledge somehow that like if I want this to work, I have to give everything to it. I actually have to give up everything, and in hindsight, I don't think that was actually true, but that was the that was the belief I had at the time, and so yeah, I moved back to the continent, to East Africa. If I had not made that decision, absolutely the company would not be here today, because I was only seeing the tip of the iceberg as far as what I was missing by flying in and out before I actually moved there, and so that's made a big difference. And I think what was accurate is I did have to move there But the idea that you have to give up everything for something to work, I don't know if that's fully true. I mean, to me, what's been clear from the beginning with the company is I'm not just starting some small company that can, provide some few people with drinking water. To me, it was very much about, can we start something that can actually change the world in a much bigger way and have that much bigger impact. And so it almost felt like a religious decision more than a business decision to say, I should give everything to this, because it felt like this is a way where I can actually use whatever small experience I have to try to make a difference.
That's really interesting. And it made me wonder about what it feels like internally to make a decision that is in fact like good for you or right for you versus what it feels like when you're making a decision that you're not quite at ease with and then you maybe need to potentially walk back. I'm wondering what it felt like when you decided to join the army, what it felt like versus what it felt like when you decided to move continents, uh, kind of permanently. And did it feel the same? Was it just hindsight that helped you understand the difference?
But the interesting thing is, like, when I made the decision to leave the army, um, I felt so good about it. Like, and before I made the decision, I spent so much time thinking about it, and I had so much guilt. Like, I have a duty and all of this, and I need to fulfill that. And once I made the decision, I definitely had peace that was the right thing for me. And in fact, like, over time, it became more and more clear. Like, this was one of the best decisions I ever made. Was that. For the decision with Jibu, it was actually quite the opposite. It was sort of like an after decision, or post decision effect, where I realized, okay, I'm going to have to continue to make this decision every day. It wasn't a one off decision that I made. I'm going to have to continue to commit to this for it to really work. So
I do think in the moment it is very hard to kind of separate out what are jitters versus what is like the universe saying no, don't do that. Um, and something that I've been trying to do more and more is get curious about that sensation of fear and like lean into it and then say it out loud. Like, what is the thing that I'm really afraid of might happen? And then question whether that's true or not. And in what ways is it true? And underlying all of that, just a real desire to get at what is the reality, even if the reality is this fear is absolutely justified. Um, but I also really like what you're saying about it's a daily decision to commit to something and to work towards it and to grow in this way. And the counterfactual, just you maybe not ever starting Jibu might be equally as good, might be worse. I mean, there's really
mhm.
no point in kind of dwelling on that. But I think either way, you would be this like internally rich person who's like trying to do impactful work. And
And I actually think I wouldn't be the same person if I didn't make that decision, because I just wouldn't have had the rich experiences that I've had as far as like stepping outside of my normal bubble. Like, I think I would still be the same person as far as earnestly trying to make myself better and all of that, or whatever, aspects I have as far as like my temperament or spirit, or whatever you want to call it. Um, but I could also, I would have a much less rich, um, array of things I would have experienced. And now, I mean, now and I'm not just here because, living on the continent for work or whatever. I'm getting, married at the end of the month and all of this, and yeah, so all of that. I feel like there's a huge measure of luck in the fact that, even without being able to know anything that was going to come in the future, making those decisions ended up uh, being, incredibly beneficial, for me, both in terms of my well-being and as far as my personal development.
No regrets is like really important. I think just
Yeah,
be having the courage to step into whatever it is that you feel called to do. And it did work out. And congratulations on your upcoming
yeah. Thanks,
wedding. That's awesome.
thanks.
So, my last question is about looking ahead. I'm curious about what you've learned in the past 10 years that you want to take forward, and also what you're hoping to kind of grow into and experience.
It's it's kind of impossible to like synthesize everything into like some small tidbit or whatever, because I like to believe I'm always trying to learn every day, something new. But I think the main thing would be around, not trying to always grab the bull by the horns and steer and determine everything myself, and kind of put some trust in people around me, the world, the universe, God, however, whatever you want to call it, and think about it more like surfing than about steering the car. And I think I've tried until I'm blue in the face, trying to control things that I can't, or influence things that I can't. And I think there's a total peace and joy that comes from seeing how small I am, and how tiny and unimportant, and all the decisions I make and all of this. So I still am very passionate about making a difference in all this. And I do think it's human progress is real, and we have as agents, we have ability to improve humanity beyond just our own lives and all that. But I think it's more about, like I said, surfing, riding what's happening than it is about thinking that we're these mini demigods that can kind of do way more than we actually can. It just makes it that much more beautiful in some way, like how big and things are, and how small a role we play. For like what I'm excited about ahead, I think there's a cool sort of fun phase ahead where I'm able to leverage my experience a lot more, and learn a different level of things, a different type of things than what I was learning before. I think I've spent a lot of time learning skills, hard skills and soft skills, and every type of skill, and now I think opportunity is more about building systems and engines to replicate things, um, and also having much more of an external focus on how do I lean into the challenges others are facing, and how do I support that. And so yeah, that's what I'm excited for ahead.
That is awesome. I'm excited for you. And thank you so much for doing this with me, Galen. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm also always looking for guests who enjoy meaningful conversations. If that sounds like you, please send me a message and let me know what you'd like to talk about. I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening.